Welcome everybody. This is a webinar from Applifting. Today's topic is turn an idea into reality. I am Jan Hauser, UK CEO from Applifting, and this is Martin Serp, managing partner and solution architect at Applifting. And you will hear today from Martin, so he will take you through the topic. So please go to the next slide, Martin. Okay, just a shortly who we are, who is Applifting and what we do. So we do software, we build software, and we decided a couple of years ago that we need to go to product development since we created a couple of applications and our customers were not happy with the user traction. So we finished with doing the product development as well to make sure before creating something that the traction will be there. And that's something what this topic today will be about innovations and product development and putting your ideas into reality. So we build apps that make sense and make positive impact on people's lives. We even have ethics channel in Slack. And yeah, that's what we do. You can see a couple of our partners, current partners, and I think that's enough about Applifting and we should move to the topic. So please, let's get to another slide, Martin. Yeah, before we start, I'd like to invite you to Slido. We will use Slido for polling and rating, getting your feedback, and Q&A session during the webinar. So please go to slido.com and put there the session ID A922, and you can let us know from where you are joining us. I'll do the same. So slido.com and A922. And yeah, we see that there are some people from Prague, London, also from Train, Pilsner, and home office in the UK. Nice. I guess you join us on Slido. I'll put all the information into chat. Okay, also attends. Nice guys. It's really good to have you here. And we will have a couple of such pollings during the session. So please keep your Slido up. And now it's the moment when I pass the word to Martin. And let's start with the topic. Let's talk about innovations.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan. Would you allow me to share my camera then?
Should be now. You are the host, Martin.
Okay. Interesting. And yeah, now you can see me.
You are in. Great. Let's start.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And before we start, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Martin, and I work at Applifting. And at Applifting, we do not have titles, but should I mention one, I usually say I'm managing partner and solution architect. Besides a little bit of coding, my main job is to help companies with innovations. This could mean a product work, solution architecture, but also coaching agile teams. But now enough about me and about Applifting, and let's go straight to the topic. So innovations are hard, aren't they? But you don't need to have a superpowers. Anybody can be innovative. So why just a few dare to do so, and why even less succeed? In this webinar, we will look at innovation pitfalls and techniques, how to avoid them. Everything starts with the education. Since we entered the education system as a small kid, we learn to be perfect, don't do mistakes, respect rules, and stay in line and fulfill expectations of others. It's tricky in those conditions to stay curious and unconventional. The education system usually does not appreciate failures, experiments, or even self-expression. For example, how many of you went through a school where paintings were graded? You were a small kid, just tried to express yourself, and bang. In the best case, you silently got a bad mark. But in worst case, probably more common one, the teacher sat in front of your classmate something like, "Who did this ugly picture?" You've got a bad mark with unwanted publicity and humiliation on top. It's not encouraging to try again, right? So let's do a quick poll now. How was your school actually? If you can share with us. And here's a Slido, so you can let us know how was your school. Okay, looks like we are getting first results. 13 people already voted, 15. Great. Okay, looks like that we have like from strict 63% to respectful, now it's a little bit growing, inspiring only 11%. So good for those with inspiring or a respectful school. The majority has probably similar background as I have. Okay, thank you very much, and let's continue. So the education system contributes to a myth about failures, which holds us back. At school, we learn about great innovators from the past, like Thomas Alva Edison, how brilliant they were and what they achieved. But nobody, however, points out their failures. Did you know that Thomas Alva Edison made 10,000 failed attempts to build his bulb? Did you know that he himself built on a great work of others? In 1879, Henry Woodward and Matthew Evans patented a light bulb. In 1879, Edison purchased their patent and started his own work based on what they did before. If we are taught about failures, we talk about mainly about fatal ones. We all know that Roald Amundsen was the first man on a South Pole. And we also know that his rival Robert Scott failed as he arrived second and died, unfortunately, on his way back. Fatal failures are deterrent and frightening, aren't they? But failures does not have to be always fatal. Due to our education, the failure has a bad reputation. But without failures, there is no learning. Remember, Thomas Alva Edison failed 10,000 times before he succeeded. If the failure helps us to discover something new, which moves us forward, then it is worth it. We just need to avoid the fatal failures. It's like Winston Churchill said, success is the ability to go from one failure to another one with no loss of enthusiasm. Tom and Mary Popendik, authors of a great book, Lean Software Development, provides another perspective on the same thing. If your hypotheses are always correct, you are not going to learn very much. The maximum amount of information is generated when the probability of a failure is 50%, not when the hypotheses are always correct. So my recommendation to you as innovators is make sure the failure is your friend, not enemy. And make sure that you count with the failures and use with them as one of possible outcomes of your experiments. As there is a myth about failures, there is also one about success. We usually envision a success as a final goal. But we can win and keep the position forever, or at least as long as possible. That's why we see innovation as a linear process, starting with an idea and heading straight to the success. We think that once we succeed, we are done. But it's not true. The world is too disruptive, and our precious innovation will get obsolete anyhow. It's just a question of time. Staying successful requires to stay in an infinite game of human progress. Winning or being number one as a goal leads only to poor and toxic decisions. For example, how would you feel if you find out that some company is cheating on you to earn more money? For example, food companies claiming an improved recipe of their products when you find out they just used cheaper ingredients and made the product smaller by keeping the same price. Staying in the game means to have a progress of your users at the first place. After all, it's about them, not about us. Let me give you an example. Recording companies were running very profitable business till Napster came and everything changed. They kept fighting against the change for many years and with very limited success, instead of finding the way how to make the change happen. In fact, most people do not mind paying a reasonable amount of money for downloading the music, but they really like the possibility to be able to download what they want and when they want it. Not having the other chance, they were using illegal servers. Till Apple launched their iTunes or later Spotify came with a subscription service. Both models caused the recording companies to lose their power. That's why they were not able to be leaders of the change. But the change has happened anyway without them. If we measure our success by ability to transform user lives into something better, we can keep doing this forever. Another company who forgot why they were founded is Kodak. They started with a very, very good motto. Actually, you push the button and we do the rest. And with that, they created generations of amateur photographers. But later, they missed an opportunity to advance their users further with digital camera. Even if they actually invented it, Kodak didn't want to cannibalize their business coming from their traditional photography. Kodak management rather fooled themselves that people will always want physical copy of their photos. As we know, Kodak still exists, but now it has just a really marginal market share. So now we know what are the ingredients of innovation. So let me quickly recap those. First, experiment, test your hypothesis, and learn by managed failures. Second, think about your users and about how you can continuously transform their life into something better. In the second part of the webinar, we will have a look at some techniques how to take this knowledge into an action. Okay, let me move to the next slide. So great, you have an idea, but now you need to find out whether this idea matters to anybody else than you. Always start with the problem, not with the solution. Finding a problem to your solution may be an expensive experiment. However, it's quite tempting and it's happening quite often. Innovators just love their ideas, but where there is no problem, there's actually no solution. Interesting point of view is how potential users are solving their problem today. You may find out that they don't, as they are just struggling, or they are using combination of different products. The pain they have, cost they pay, time they are losing, or opportunity they are missing, gives you an insight how motivated they may be to use your product. Innovators have a bias, and that is a risk they would seek for confirmation of their ideas rather than for thoughts which oppose them. It usually helps if they surround themselves with the people who are able to challenge their ideas and ask burning questions without a fear being punished. At Applifting, when we start a new project with our clients, we used to verify how they validated their ideas. It's usually a quite tough moment. Imagine we are in competition with other agencies for a project. Client want to select an agency, quite often by price, and requesting estimate for what they call the MVP, which is usually full-blown product. And we start asking them burning questions. The reason why we do so is that we are committed not only to develop quality software, but also to success of their project. If we have a doubt, we feel a duty to ask them burning questions. The innovation is not about features we develop, but it's about the most optimal way in which startup capital is turned into validated learning, first user base, and a minimum viable product. This is something the startup has to discover in iterations and cannot be estimated at the beginning of the project. So building innovative products requires us to deal with an unknown. However, the unknown is one of the biggest fears for humans. To protect us from that fear, our brain fools us in different ways. For example, makes us believe that our assumptions are just correct. Makes us believe that the problem is an analog of another one. Thus, our line of thinking must be correct. But whatever decision we take shall be supported by knowledge. But the knowledge may not be available. If we talk about innovations, it's mostly the case. The unknown is an unknown because there are no answers we can gain by analysis. We need to use a technique allowing us to systematically uncover the unknown. Such techniques is called validated learning, and we will see it on the next slide. So, validated learning is an iterative process where innovators do experiments. And it is advised to do those experiments in a real market and with the real users. With every iteration, we plan what to validate, build new increment, and measure the effect. The iteration should be rather short. Long iteration increase the risk we produce a waste. Also, in order to analyze the cause and effect of what we do, we cannot test many hypotheses at the same time. Thus, it makes no sense to produce a large increment. As a byproduct of our experiments, we are building the minimal viable product and gaining the first traction. I have a quick poll for you to check your understanding of minimal viable product. So let's start it again now. So there are five answers. The first one is to be quickly on the market before someone steals the idea from us. Or it is to simplify scope of the fixed price contract with our vendor, or to minimize cost of the product and get budget approved, or to test our hypothesis as quick and cheap as possible, or to focus on the most important features and build them as good as possible. So what do you think? Okay, eight people answered. Okay, let's wait a little bit longer. Okay, good. So most of you, 60% actually provided correct answer, and we will see on the next slide. So let me close the poll now. So when we build an innovative product, we should think big, but we shall start small. A common mistake is to overdevelop the MVP and keep it out of the real user side till it is perfect. The purpose of MVP is to attract first customers, which are usually early adopters, who can give us a feedback, which is essential for the process of the validated learning, as we see, as was described earlier. The MVP shall be as cheap and fast as possible. Anything advanced and fancy would increase the risk of a waste. It is another tough moment, making something far from perfect, which will be redone in the future. It is against common sense. It seems like a waste. There are always good arguments against it, like it will be difficult to scale up later. It will harm our reputation, or we can get better price from vendor if we make fixed price or fixed scope contract now, and so on. In fact, none of those are real risks you will be facing. At the beginning, you have a small amount of users, so scaling and reputation are irrelevant, unless you are operating under a well-known brand, but this is a little bit different story. On the other hand, developing big chunk of non-validated functionality represents a huge risk of waste. Did you know that the first iPhone third-party apps were HTML pages running in Safari browser? Maybe it was Steve Jobs' intention to avoid native third-party applications. Anyhow, if Apple first developed the whole programming ecosystem for iPhone, it will delay the launch at least of a year. If we now tend to believe that whatever Steve Jobs touched turned into the gold, back in 2007, it was not that sure that iPhone will be economically successful. So spending a lot of money and effort upfront and delay the launch of the product till everything is perfect would mean high risk, which kind of is an MVP in action for me. In a startup world, any assumption or hypothesis has to be validated. Not only the product itself, but also the sales strategy, marketing strategy, customer acquisition process, etc. The monetization strategy is no exception, and you should involve it into your experiments. Many startups are too shy to ask for money for their incomplete and imperfect products. They want to figure out monetization once their product is perfect. But remember, the side effect of our experiments is to build the first traction. If we do not involve the monetization we most probably build a wrong group of early adopters, and we lose it once we start asking for money. Here on this slide, we see the validated learning we have seen before, but with a small change. When the expected results of iterations are not good or good enough, it's time to ask whether we should preserve the course or pivot. Pivot means a change of a key product or service characteristic while keeping others intact. For example, we can keep the service as is, but change the monetization model. Or we can refocus on different type of customers. Pivot will generate a whole new set of hypotheses and may revert decisions we have taken before. Important is to change only one key characteristic at a time so we can understand the cause and effect. We also assume we will keep the new course for several iterations, which gives us opportunity to explore a new setup. Let's have a look at the growth of a startup. Whatever the graph you can see on a slide represents, number of users, revenue, there is an iconic shape of hockey stick every founder would like to achieve. Actually, growth is good, but it is much better if it's organic. Too sharp hockey stick graph can drain startup resources. The main goal of MVP is to generate the first traction and answer burning questions about the value and the growth. Its purpose is not to get startup ready for massive growth. Taking the massive growth into an equation from the beginning will slow down the learning and make the MVP more expensive. It will require to take premature decisions we do not have enough information for. Once uncertainties are resolved and growing amount of early adopters are using the service or product, the startup is in a good position to raise money for the scaling from angel investor or venture capital investor. Also, an investment into more robust, sustainable, and scalable version of MVP may make much more sense at this phase. And remember, as we said, the scaling is not the end of the story. The startup keeps searching for the next innovation and evolution of its service and product, while keeping the aim of its users at the first place. Okay, at the end, let me give you an example of major innovation of past decade. Today, after several decades of development and many pivots, we take personal computer and their segments for granted. But at 1968, when Doug Engelbart, on an event known as Mother of All Demos, presented concept of personal computer including mouse, hyperlink, primitive graphical interface, it looked like science fiction. Engelbart's vision of augmented human intellect inspired many young innovators, including Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Bill Gates, and many others. They saw affordable and independent personal computers as a tool which can significantly empower individuals and small businesses. But the journey from Engelbart's presentation to nowadays computer was full of flops, which left many companies behind. Searching for the right market fit with the use of affordable platforms and offering interesting solutions at affordable price in a quickly evolving industry was a huge challenge and required a lot of pivots. For example, there was at the beginning computers for hackers and enthusiasts like Apple I or Atlas 8800, or computers dedicated for playing games like Commodore 64 and Sinclair ZX Spectrum, and later computers for business like Apple II, Apple III, or PC, and all combinations. This history is a great source of inspiration for nowadays innovators. So for your further reading, let me share with you a couple of books. So the year-old All Good Scrum is a proven agile framework for execution of iterative processes, which can come handy for iterations and validated learning. You can read a Scrum guide, which is quite lean document. It has only 20 pages, and you can download a PDF. Lean Startup, written by Eric Ries, is a great book. It applies traditional lean and software and lean software development principles in startup world and provides practical examples. I also like When Coffee and Kale Compete by Ant Clement. It explains methodology jobs to be done, which is a great tool helping to concentrate on problems rather than a solution. And last but not least, Originals by Adam Grant. It's actually a great argumentation that inventor can be any one of us. And before we finish, let me quickly recapitulate and remind you a couple of key points I would like to take away from this presentation. So first, formulate your product hypothesis. Do not assume anything you do not know for sure. Second, do not start with the solution, start with the problem. Third, use short iterations to experiment and validate your understanding. 4, improve your MVP iteratively as you go and use it to build your first traction. 5, if you build commercial product, ask for money right from the beginning. And 6, compare progress with your experiments and expectations, and pivot if required. If you would need any help, Applifting is offering a service called Digital Product Creation, and we will help you from the formulation of your first hypothesis till the scaling phase. Okay, thank you very much. And with that, let me close the presentation with a short feedback poll. So if you can let us know how you like the content provided. Okay. And while I'm providing a feedback, and then I will hand over back to Jan, who will moderate the Q&A session. So if 18 people voted.
So, yeah, here, man. It seems like I cannot use my video right now. So there is some kind of bug in there. It doesn't matter. We can do it like this. Yeah. Finally, it's important that people can see you. I'm not really important person here. I'm not unable to start video. So if you can, Martin, yeah, thanks everybody for the rating. We finished with 4.3. It's pretty good, I think. And
thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. And we can get to the Q&A session if you can skip to next slide.
Okay.
Yes, and we are here. So we will use Slido for your questions. So if you have any questions, please go to Slido, put there your questions. We will go through them here and we will answer them all. We have plenty of time, so we are pretty interested in your questions. I'll start with the first one, which actually I put it myself in Slido to show it as an example. But the question, Martin, is what is the most common issue you are dealing with when customer reach you?
Yeah, it's thank you for the question, Jan. So the common issue we are dealing with where we get in touch with new client is to convince them that they should spend some effort and money for the validation of their ideas. Usually the clients want to jump on the development from the very beginning, and they see the validation of their ideas as a waste because they are pretty sure that the idea will work. But in many cases, they do not have any proof, any measurements, any validation. So what we do, we usually trying to convince them that it's a good idea to spend small money to validate and only then invest bigger money to develop.
And if I get a bit more personal, are you successful with that? Are the people up to do that? If you explain what it means, are there any more obstacles they need to reach before they continue with you?
I would say that it's like 50-50. The feedback from half of the customers is that they really welcome the approach. So they welcome honest feedback. And 50% usually insist that they are pretty sure, and it doesn't matter, they don't have any numbers measured, and they still would like to have the estimate and start with the development right from the beginning.
Yeah, I think I understand. So let's get to next question. I'll continue with the first one here at the top. Given your no manager structure, how do you decide which direction will the company go in the future?
It's an interesting one. Yeah, this is probably from someone who knows that we are like a flat organization, like a teal organization. This is good. I think it's not exactly a consensus of people in a company because it would be really not flexible enough. But we have the council of elders, which is like a voted group of people who has some say and can take some decisions. And also, we are using Slack, and if there are very important things, then we are discussing it on Slack. And of course, there might be people against, but we take the feedback really seriously in the company.
Yeah. I would just add that it's always about discussion. So as you mentioned, the Council of Elders, it's some kind of, let's say, board or something like that in uplifting, right? And people are voted there, people rotate there. So it's not pure democracy, I would say, but it's possible to put your voice into the council and like influence the main direction. Yeah, let's get to next question. It was told to create hypotheses without unconfirmed facts, but that is principle of hypothesis, isn't it?
It is, and maybe I didn't express myself clearly. What I meant is that we start with the hypothesis, and we consciously create hypotheses at the beginning. So we write them down. So if we start with some client who has an idea, then we ask that client to sit down with us and really write down the hypothesis, because usually there is one main hypothesis, but there are many others, like about monetization and so on. And in many cases, they don't go that far to write them down and make whole a list. And then when we have it, we start describing personas and their needs, and we put together quite a lot of information we need to validate. And based on that, we prioritize and we decide what has to be validated first, what is the most burning question, which will tell us whether the idea makes sense or does not make sense. And of course, at the beginning, we might not validate it for 100%. So that's why we then continue with iterative development and with MVP. But it's better than nothing if we have at least like the clickable prototype, or we can do a questionnaire and ask people what they think about or how they behave today. Asking them what they think is quite twofold question. But what we usually would like to know, how they are solving kind of a problem today, if this problem is struggle for them or not.
It pretty much sounds like uh, risk mitigation in the end, right?
Yeah, this is definitely the risk mitigation.
Yeah, we got another question. So thank you, Dimitri. And the question is, we are in a situation where we cannot really decide on which feature to focus. Same as business development. There are just too many ideas. Any advice?
Yeah, there is the usual advice is, if you don't know, then do the experiment. So if you have too many, you need to somehow cut them down. So you select one or two, and then you do cheap experiments. You need to validate whether it makes sense or not. And your task actually is to find the cheapest and fastest way how to validate. You can develop something simple in the product, or you can develop some, I don't know, landing page where you can test your ideas. In these cases, you usually would like to do your experiments on a limited amount of users. So you can do A/B testing, for example. So yeah, great example nowadays is a Clubhouse. But it's a hypothesis. They did it this way, but we think that they launched the platform on iPhone not because they are iPhone lovers, but because they wanted to have a limited amount of people at the beginning. So you can think a similar way. You can do regional isolation of your experiments, or you can scope it by technology or something like that. So you isolate the focus group, and then you do the experiment.
Which kind of leads me to one topic we were talking about before the webinar, and we discussed like how small the minimal viable product should be, right? So what could you tell us about this?
Yeah, I would say that it should be as small as possible to give you the answer you are looking for. And you need to be really creative. Sometimes it's really not obvious what you can do to find answer to your question. Sometimes it's pen and paper which is enough. Sometimes it's just a simple web page. Sometimes you really need to develop something. But more creative you are, the better for you.
Yeah, I think I get it. Okay, we have currently no more questions. I'll leave a couple of minutes for the people to ask something more. Yeah, we have one more, so we can get to this question. So I'll just read it. How do you approach development of MVP when you have dependency on technology provider? I mean, do you involve also your providers into your own innovation?
Yeah, we usually do not distinguish between providers and clients and like vendors. If we are building the innovative team, we want to have on board everybody who can contribute and who can de-risk the process or provide the knowledge. So, and I know that it might be really difficult, maybe in situations when you have like quite old product and you would like to innovate it, etc. But my advice would be really to bring into your team whomever you need to move forward in the fastest and cheapest way. And maybe if we are talking about MVP, usually the MVP does not have to be in target technology. So you might have your target technology in mind because you might have all the other solutions in the technology. But you can start your MVP with something much lighter, because there is a risk the MVP won't succeed, and then you will throw it away, and an investment into expensive licenses or into a technology which requires much more effort to develop something would be a waste.
Yeah, I would maybe add here, Thomas, that you are also asking about the dependency on technology provider, and I would strongly recommend, if you are in MVP stage, and mm, try to communicate with your technology provider try to keep the communication as transparent as possible, because you you need to know about what's happening. You need to know about how they create the product, because otherwise you could have really like uncomfortable situation due to vendor locking, and you don't want to get there basically. Okay, so this was next question by Thomas. And thanks for all the 6 questions now. And as I said before, I will leave a couple of minutes here for you to ask something more. I've actually prepared one more question, so I can ask now, Martin. And it will be a bit more personal. Why have you decided to help the other with their products and not to build your own?
Thank you, Ram. This is a good question. Well, first of all, I like the innovation, and I know the methodology, so I like the job. And currently, I don't have any idea. I would say that it would make sense to start with. So, but maybe one time I will do.
Okay, I can see, I can see. So I think we are in the end of the session, since there are no more questions, and we are reaching the end of the webinar. So thanks for all the questions. I hope we answered all of them well. And thank you for joining us. This was Martin Serp, and this was also Uplifting. And if you want to talk to Martin more, you can book him for a 20-minute session and to chat with him about your products, about the approach you want to go, and about whatever you like, basically, about product development. I'm going to post the link to the call to Martin into the chat together with our email and phone numbers. And we are very much looking forward to see you during our next session, which should be, I think, in a month from now. So let's meet there and have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Martin. And
Thank you.
thanks for your attendance, people. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day to all of you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.